In this video, we are deep diving into Sevalla's static site hosting offering and also the edge deployment part. And it is one of the most exciting features that Sevalla offers, completely free for your first 100 static sites, which is more than enough, I'm guessing, for most of the use cases. If you have been following along with this series, you have already seen how Sevalla handles dynamic applications and databases along with it. But what if you have a simple portfolio site or a documentation site or a simple marketing site or a React application that does not really need any kind of server-side processing? It is a completely single page application, which means your server, whichever server that serves the files, it sends the HTML, JavaScript and CSS files to the browser, and the browser does the rest of the work. Nothing happens on the server side after that point. That's exactly where the static site hosting shines. By the end of this video, you'll understand when to use static site hosting versus when to use dynamic applications, and how Sevalla's edge deployment works across 260 plus global locations, and will deploy a real application, a real React based application together. Will also enable CDN hosting and edge deployment for that, so that our application has the minimum amount of latency worldwide. Does not matter where your users are. So this is what we are going to cover today in this video. The first is we'll clarify the fundamental difference between static sites and dynamic applications. And this is important because choosing the wrong hosting type can lead to unnecessary complexity and costs. Second, we'll explore Sevalla supported frameworks and the build process. But spoiler alert, if it uses Node.js, then Sevalla can handle it. And third, we'll dive deep into the build commands and publish directories, the two settings that make or break your deployment. Fourth, we'll look at pull request reviews and staging workflows, features that make collaborative development workflows very seamless. Fifth, I'll explain Sevalla's edge deployment architecture and why it is so fast. And sixth, finally, we'll do a hands-on deployment of a React application and walking through every step from Git connection to going live. So let's get started. The first question is, of course, what exactly is a static site? So as I've already said, a static site basically consists of pre-built assets. Pre-built as in the sense, the server does not have to process any data. It just gets a request and it just serves whatever file that it has. And when I say pre-built assets, most of the time it means HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And there are other assets like images, video, audio, whatever other media type you can imagine. So when someone visits your site, they get the exact files all the time. Now this whole idea is completely different from dynamic applications, where content or data that may be generated on the fly depending on who is requesting it and what they can access, because it involves database queries and user sessions and server-side logic and a lot of other things. So static sites, basically, they do not need any server-side processing. They do not have any kind of database connections. They are extremely fast because files are already present. You just have to fetch them. They're highly secure because there are no server-side vulnerabilities, and they're globally cacheable. And that is the reason static sites are a perfect suit for CDN-based deployments. And you might use static sites for things like portfolio websites, your marketing sites, your documentations, your blogs, and any kind of single-page applications like React that we know. The next thing that I want to bring your focus into is the economics of static sites. Economics. And what do we mean by economics? Basically, the whole pricing part, how much you will be charged and how much is free. As I mentioned in the start of the video, you will get 100 static sites free per account. So that is your first major offering, 100 static sites free. Second, you get 600 GB of build time per month, because static sites usually take longer to build because they have to do a lot of stuff. They have to do some kind of database fetching, or they have to do some kind of rendering to finally prepare the pre-built assets that will be served from CDNs or any kind of edge locations. That's a build time may be longer. That's why we have a limitation, but 600 GB per month is more than enough of your build time. Third, 100 GB bandwidth, basically how much data can be transferred from your servers to your users. And after you exceed this, you'll be charged $0.05 of build time per minute, and for bandwidth you'll be charged 0.10 per GB of bandwidth after you exceed the free limits. Okay, that's the economics side of it. Then let's talk about what are the frameworks that are supported. So one thing to remember is Sevalla's static site hosting. It is built around Node.js, which means that either your site needs to one be pre-built, which means that just HTML, CSS, or JS that is ready to serve. We are just uploading a static site. Or two, if it is not pre-built, then it has to use a node-based build system, something like Webpack or Vite or framework-specific builders like Gatsby or Next.js, right? So it has to be Node.js specific, or you have to serve pre-built assets. Otherwise, it will not work. The most popular frameworks that we can talk about is React, of course. You can use React either using Create React app, which is deprecated. So you can go with something like Vite or Next.js using static export. Right? You can use Vue with Nuxt or any other tool. You can also use Angular, because these are all SPAs, also known as single page applications. You can also use Svelte Kit. Apart from those, we can also use things like Gatsby, Astro. These are specifically built for static site generations. But what about the frameworks which are not using Node.js? Because there are other frameworks which are very famous for static sites. For example, we have Jekyll, which uses Ruby, not Node.js. We also have Hugo, which uses Go. If you have static site tools like these, then you have to pre-build those sites locally, push those build sites, and Sevalla can take it from there. Or you have to use application hosting. So you only have two choices if your build system, your static site build system is not Node.js based. So let's go to our dashboard now, and we'll see how the static site interface looks like. This is our Sevalla dashboard. Let's click on add a static site. And this is the screen we get. So this we are already familiar with. We have to click on a GitHub repository. As of now, we only have one. So we'll need to add another static site. I already have a React app created here, which we can explore a little bit. It is the Vite app. It is using Vite instead of Create. And if we take a look at the package.json, it has standard structure using React router for routing and etc. And we have a couple of pages here. If you go to pages, we have a couple of sample pages like about page and a contact page and a home page, so that we can quickly test how the static site is working in Sevalla. Now going back to our dashboard, these are the basic details that we have to provide. The first thing that we need to do is allow our new repository. So let's click on this and I'll go here. I'll need to quickly authenticate this. And here I'll need to add another repository, which is going to be the React demo. Okay, click on save. After that, we can do a refresh here. Now we should see the React demo appearing here. So let's select that. By default, we want to deploy the main branch. And let's enable this, which will in turn deploy our application every time we push some new changes into our main branch. Display name, let's keep it my React app. Now here at this screen, we have another interesting feature of Sevalla that we have not talked about so far. Pull request preview. Pull request preview basically means that when we are working in teams, the way development workflow looks like is different people are working on different features or different bug fixes, and they are working in different branches. And when they want to merge that branch into our main branch or our develop branch, they have to raise a pull request. And when they do raise a pull request, other people in the team have to review that pull request, the code and the functionality. And if everything looks all right, they can merge that pull request. But how do you actually see the changes of that pull request? The obvious way and the traditional way is to check out in your local to that branch, take a pull from remote and run it in your local and see what all changes that have been made there. Or you can use Sevalla's pull request preview, which means every time one of the team members raises a new pull request, Sevalla will automatically generate a preview environment, which means it will give you a temporary domain, and you can go to that domain and you can see what all changes that have been made there, and that will not affect your main application. This is a very big advantage if you are working in a team and you want to speed up your workflow. So what we'll do, we'll enable it so that we can see how it works. After this, let's click on continue. And finally, this is our build setting. Now, Sevalla was able to automatically detect that we are using React and we are using Vue. So it has tried to fill in some of the information. So the build command, which basically means the command that gets run so that the assets, the pre-built assets, the static assets can be built. And this is the command for our application. If we go to the package or JSON, here we can see that we have a command here which runs our TypeScript checker. Then we build to build our static assets so that that can be served from CDNs or any kind of servers. Going back, this is what we have provided in our build script. Then we have to select our Node.js version. We are going with LTS, which means the latest stable version of Node.js, whatever that is. We can quickly check what is the LTS version. Here we can see that Node 22 is the LTS version currently. So that's what Sevalla will use to build our application. Root directory by default will be the current directory, whatever is the default directory. It will not change. If you are using a monorepo kind of setup, then you can change the root directory. Otherwise, it's fine. You can leave it blank. Then comes the publish directory. Publish directory is basically means that when you run the build command, what is the location where all the pre-built assets will be stored at. So if we go to our local, we don't have any built assets right now. So let's do one thing. We'll try to run npm run build. We got a TypeScript error here. We have to mention it as a type. And we also have another error. This is an ESLint error, so we can ignore that. Let's run our npm run build again. And when the build is successful, you can see that a new directory, a new folder is created, which is called dist. Now inside this, we have our pre-built assets, the assets that are going to be served. So the first thing is the index.html page. Then we also have an assets folder, which contains our CSS, all the minified CSS, all the JavaScript that we are going to need for our single page application, and the SVG, the React's logo that was there in our demo. Let's do one thing. Since we made a change, let's push this. And this dist folder is what we are providing here, which means that publish directory. Sevalla basically asks you that where are all the pre-built assets stored after the build command is successfully run, so that it can take that and it can upload that to different CDNs and different edge deployment sites, so that your site can be served with minimum amount of latency from all over the world. And what is the index file? Basically, the first file that gets served when you go to the home location, the /route. And also the error file, which is the same file that we have provided in the index file. If you want to provide any kind of environment variable, that you can do here. We don't need to do that. So let's go ahead and click on create site, and this static site is created, and Sevalla has started a new deployment for our site. And if we click on this, we can see the logs of the deployment. And finally, here we see the log that static site has been deployed successfully. So if we try to access it now, let's say clicking on visit site, this is our React that is served statically from Sevalla, and we can go to different routes here. The next thing that I want to show is the pull request preview that we just talked about. So let me go here, and what we'll do, we'll go to one of the pages. Let's say we go to the about page, and here I'll add, or let's say I'll change this line, and we'll say this is from a PR, and I'll try to check out to a different branch. Let's say check the PR. Let's say the branch name is PR, and I went there. I'll add this. I'll also commit this, and we'll push this to the PR branch. Once that is done, we can see here that in our dashboard, a new deployment has started. If you check the environment, it is not a production deployment. It is called a preview deployment, which means that it is not going to affect our production. It was triggered by a particular commit. Looks like this is done. And if we click on this, here we can see that build command is succeeded. And if we want to visit this, we can see there is a visit branch preview option. If we click on that, we'll land here, and let's go to the about page. And here we can see that this change that we did, this is from a PR that is reflecting here. But if you go to our main application, which is this domain, you can do a refresh here, and we can go to the about page, which is still the same, which means that our production application, our primary application, that is still the same, but our preview deployment, someone did a change and pushed it into a branch, and that change is reflecting in a different domain so that other people or the same person even can test it and make sure that everything is working fine, and they can do whatever is necessary. And after everything is successful, they can merge that branch into the main, and that will finally do a production deployment. So let's go to GitHub and let's go to our React demo application. And here there is an option to raise a pull request. So let's create the pull request, and the target is main. After this, we just want to go ahead and merge it. So I'll click on merge pull request, confirm merge. And finally, going back to our Sevalla dashboard, here we can see that since we merged our pull request into our main branch, Sevalla started another deployment. But this time the environment is production, which means it's not a preview environment. We are going to see the change that we saw in the preview environment in our main branch, in our production environment. So let's wait a little bit. Now let's going back to our production environment. Let's do a refresh. And here we see that this is from a PR is appearing here, which means our whole workflow is completely streamlined. We don't have to manually do anything. We don't have to manually check out to a new branch in our local to test the changes of our teammates. We can do everything using preview environments and pull requests. One last thing that I want to talk about is the edge location. Here, if you see, it says that our application is deployed to the edge, and it has some description here what edge means. But let's talk about what exactly does edge deployment mean. Now, if we talk about our traditional deployment, what happens? First thing, your files, whatever code files that we have, whatever static files that we have, they live in a single server, right? Single server, whether it is an AWS, GCP, Azure, whatever the traditional web servers are, all of the files, all our code files and our static files, they all live inside a single server. Second thing, what happens? Users from all over the world, they make requests to our server for those files. It can be static files again, or code files like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, this distance, let's say this our server is somewhere in the US, but the users are somewhere in the India, right? So this is a huge distance, right? For some people, for some users which are here, which are in US, they will get less amount of latency, but the users which are far away from US, they'll experience a greater latency. And that is the difference between our traditional static site hosting and our modern edge deployment based static hosting. So what happens exactly in the edge hosting? First thing is your files. Whenever your files are built using your static site generator or whatever framework that you're using, all your files are copied to 260 plus locations worldwide, globally, to different servers. Now, the second thing what happens, again, we have users from across the world, right? And those users, whenever they make a new request, that request will not go to our server. Let's say our server is here. It will not go to our server here, but instead those requests will be served by different edge nodes. Basically means any computer, any server which is closer to the user, that is going to take the request, and that is going to send the files back to the users, which in turn creates the minimum amount of latency, and the speed is maximized completely. For this task, this specific task, Sevalla uses Cloudflare. It is a global network, and it offers Cloudflare workers for that. It also has a huge CDN network. So when someone in Tokyo visits your site, they get files from your Tokyo edge server. Same way, someone from London gets files from London. Someone from New York gets their files from New York. So this is not a small amount of latency reduction. This is a huge latency reduction that we are talking about. We're talking about reducing load times from seconds to hundreds of milliseconds, right? That is a huge difference. If you want, we can go to our site. Say we go here and let's run a lighthouse score. So, right, I'll click on analyze page load, and we can see here that performance that we are getting is 98%, which is pretty great for a single page application. Right? What exactly happens when a static site is built? Then edge deployment is enabled for that. First thing, which is the build phase. Here, Sevalla's continuous deployment architecture, it fetches your code from GitHub, of course, that is the logically first thing to do. And your code is built using Node.js in Sevalla's build environment, which basically means that this build script is run, and this in turn creates a node script execution, and your code is built, and finally some static files are produced. That is the first thing that happens, build phase. Second, distribution. Distribution basically means that whatever files that were built using your static site generator, whatever workflow that you have, all the CSS files, images or audio files, video files, whatever static files that were created, all of them are pushed into Cloudflare's network, Cloudflare's global network, right? Third, propagation. Propagation basically means whatever files that are pushed to the Cloudflare network, they in turn get propagated to hundreds of servers worldwide, which are more than 260 plus edge locations. They are pushed into those locations. Fourth, we have optimization. Optimization basically means that Cloudflare applies some automatic optimization like compressing the files, minimizing the space or variables. There are a lot of compression algorithms, and Cloudflare implements some of them so that the sizes of the files are reduced, and that can give you a little bit more reduction in latency. And finally, we have caching. Caching means that all the files that were sent to all these 260 plus edge locations, they're intelligently cached based on the content type, based on the user's requests. Now, all this thing beautifully happens automatically every time you push to your main branch or to your preview branch. And within a few seconds, as we saw here, within just 24 seconds or 30 seconds and 24 seconds, your site is completely built and it is live, and it is across 260 plus edge locations all over the world, which offers a lot of speed and minimum amount of latency. And it is one of the best setups if you have any kind of static site requirements. So that is pretty much all that we had to learn about static sites. See you in the next video.